She was laughing at something on her phone when I walked into the kitchen that Tuesday morning. Not the polite kind of laughter you offer strangers at networking events. Real laughter. The kind that comes from your chest and makes your shoulders shake. I poured coffee and waited for her to share the joke. She didn't. "Good morning," I said. "Morning." Isolde didn't look up. Her thumbs moved across the screen in quick, practiced motions. She was smiling at someone who wasn't me. That's when I knew. Not suspected. Knew. Not because of the laughter itself, but because of what came after. The way she tilted the screen away, the way her expression reset to neutral when she finally glanced up, the way she said, "Just something from work," in a tone that meant the conversation was already over. I'd been married to Isolde Vane for 4 years. I knew the difference between privacy and concealment. The kitchen was bright. Too bright. We'd chosen these windows together, back when "we" meant something more than shared utility bills and coordinated calendar notifications. Morning light poured across the marble countertop Isolde had insisted on during the renovation. It was beautiful. Cold. Exactly like the woman standing in it. "I have a call at 8, she said, already moving toward the hallway. "Can you handle the dishes?" I looked at the single coffee mug I'd used. "Sure." She paused at the doorframe, her hand resting on the white painted wood. For a moment I thought she might say something real, something that acknowledged the growing distance between us. Instead, she adjusted her watch and disappeared into her home office. I wasn't married to a person. I was married to a press statement. Isolde worked in brand consulting. She helped companies craft narratives that made people feel things they wouldn't naturally feel. She was brilliant at it. Her clients paid obscene amounts of money for her ability to turn mediocrity into aspiration, to make people believe that buying the right product or supporting the right initiative would transform them into better versions of themselves. She'd been applying those same skills to our marriage for at least 6 months. Every conversation was managed. Every interaction was optimized for minimal conflict and maximum efficiency. We didn't fight anymore. We didn't really talk. We exchanged information like colleagues at a project handoff meeting. I finished my coffee and rinsed the mug. Through the window above the sink, I could see Mrs. Kowalski walking her terrier down the sidewalk. She waved, I waved back. Normal morning, normal neighborhood, normal life slowly rotting from the inside. My phone buzzed. Email from Julian Krauss, my colleague at the infrastructure firm where I worked as a project strategist. The subject line read, "Berlin Update." I'd almost forgotten about Berlin. 3 months ago, the firm had offered me a position heading up their European expansion. It was a significant promotion. Better pay, better title, better opportunities for the kind of large-scale infrastructure work I actually cared about. I'd turned it down. Because of Isolde. Because she'd said her business was finally gaining traction in the city. Because she'd said moving would set her back years. Because she'd looked at me with those clear gray eyes and said, "I need you here." So I'd stayed. I opened Julian's email. He'd forwarded the job posting. They were advertising the position again. Someone had declined it or failed to work out. Julian had added a single line. "They'd take you in a heartbeat. Still interested?" I stared at the screen for a long time. From the office down the hall, I could hear Isolde's voice. Warm, engaged, laughing again. She never laughed like that with me anymore. I closed the email without responding and headed to my own office upstairs. Work was work. I spent the morning reviewing feasibility reports for a proposed transit corridor that would probably never get built. Politicians would grandstand about infrastructure investment, consultants would collect fees, and in 5 years, someone would quietly shelve the project. That's how it usually went. Around noon, Isolde knocked on my door. She was dressed for lunch. Tailored blazer, heels, the necklace I'd bought her for our anniversary last year. "I'm meeting a client," she said. "I'll be back around 3. "Which client?" The question hung in the air for half a second too long. "Rafe Calderon," she said. "He's developing that boutique property near the waterfront. Wants to discuss brand positioning?" Rafe Calderon. I'd heard that name before, more than once. Always delivered with the same careful neutrality, as if saying it too enthusiastically might reveal something. "Didn't you used to date him?" I asked. Isolde's expression didn't change. That was the tell. A real denial would have come with surprise or amusement. Instead, she gave me the look she reserved for clients who asked stupid questions. "We dated briefly, years ago, before I met you." She checked her watch. "He's a professional contact now, that's all." "Right. Callum." Her voice had that edge now, the one that meant I was being unreasonable. "You're not seriously suggesting I should cut off a business relationship because of ancient history." "I didn't suggest anything." "Good." She turned to leave, then paused, turned back. Actually, since we're on the subject, I want to be clear about something. I'm not going to drop a former boyfriend from my professional network just because you're feeling insecure. That's not how adults handle relationships. The words were precise, prepared. This wasn't a spontaneous response. She'd been expecting this conversation, or one like it. I could have argued. Could have pointed out that former boyfriend and client were conveniently overlapping categories. Could have asked why every mention of Rafe Calderon came with that particular defensive tone. Instead, I said, "That's reasonable." Isolde blinked. She'd been ready for a fight. My agreement threw her off balance for exactly 2 seconds before she recovered. "Okay then," she said. "I'll see you later." I listened to her footsteps descend the stairs, listened to the front door close, listened to her car start and pull out of the driveway. Then I opened my laptop and pulled up Julian's email again. I read the Berlin job posting 3 times. Senior Infrastructure Strategist, European Operations. Base salary plus housing allowance plus relocation assistance. Start date flexible. I drafted a response to Julian. "Yes, still interested. Can you set up a call with their HR director?" My finger hovered over the send button. This wasn't an emotional decision. It was tactical. Isolde had spent 6 months restructuring our marriage into something convenient for her. She turned me into infrastructure, reliable, unexciting, easily taken for granted. If I stayed, this would continue. Slow erosion. If I left, she'd realize too late what she'd lost. I pressed send. Julian responded within 10 minutes. "On it, they'll be thrilled." I spent the rest of the afternoon working as if nothing had changed, reviewed reports, attended virtual meetings, responded to emails with my usual efficiency. Isolde came home at 4, not 3. She was smiling, energized in a way she hadn't been in months. "How'd it go?" I asked. "Really well. Rafe's project has incredible potential. We're going to do something special with it." "That's great." She disappeared into her office without asking about my day. I made dinner, pasta with chicken and vegetables, simple. We ate at the dining table in near silence, Isolde scrolling through her phone between bites. "Busy day tomorrow?" I asked. "Mm-hmm. I have 3 client calls and a site visit." "The waterfront project?" "Yes." She didn't elaborate. After dinner, we watched television without watching television. Isolde worked on her laptop. I pretended to read news on my tablet. We were 2 people occupying the same space without actually connecting. Around 10, she stood and stretched. "I'm exhausted. Going to bed." "I'll be up soon." She nodded and left. I sat in the living room for another hour, not moving, just thinking. There's a particular kind of loneliness that comes from being married to someone who no longer sees you, not the absence of another person, but the presence of someone who treats you like furniture, useful, stable, essentially invisible. I wasn't afraid of being alone. I was afraid of staying useful. That night, lying in bed next to Isolde, listening to her breathe in deep, untroubled sleep, I made my decision. No confrontation, no accusations, no dramatic speeches about betrayal and trust. I would simply stop being infrastructure. The next morning started exactly like the previous one. Coffee, small talk. Isolde's phone lighting up with messages that made her smile. "Another call at 8, she said. "No problem." After she closed herself in her office, I called Julian. "I need that Berlin conversation to happen fast," I said. "How soon can we make this real?" "I'll reach out today. How's next week for an interview?" "Perfect." "Callum," Julian said carefully, "is everything okay?" Julian was one of the few people at the firm who knew me well enough to ask that question. We'd worked together for 6 years. He was precise, observant, and didn't waste words. "Everything's fine," I said. "Just ready for a change." "Understood. I'll make it happen." Over the next 2 weeks, I moved through my life with careful deliberation. No dramatic changes, no visible preparation, just quiet, methodical steps. I had 3 video interviews with the Berlin office. They went well. They offered me the position within days. I accepted. Start date, 8 weeks out. Enough time to transition my current projects without raising suspicion. I began organizing my finances, consolidated accounts, updated beneficiaries, reviewed joint holdings, and made notes about what would need to be divided. I contacted a lawyer. Not for divorce yet, just for information. What would separation look like? What was fair? What was strategic? All of this happened in parallel to my normal life. I went to work, came home, made dinner, watched television, slept next to my wife. Isolde noticed nothing, or rather, she noticed that I was calmer, less stressed. She probably thought I'd finally accepted our new dynamic, that I'd stopped being insecure about her professional relationship with Rafe Calderon. She was spending more time on that project. 3 lunches a week became 4, site visits became evening meetings. She was careful to keep me informed, always framing it as work, always maintaining that professional veneer. But I was watching now. Really watching. The patterns were obvious once you looked for them. She laughed more on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Those were the days with client meetings. She came home later, slightly flushed, talking more than usual about the creative vision for the waterfront development. She'd shower immediately after arriving home, change clothes, reset. The physical tells were subtle but consistent. A lightness in her movements, a distance in her eyes when she looked at me. The way she'd flinch slightly if I touched her unexpectedly, as if her body had been calibrated to respond to someone else. I didn't need explicit evidence. The absence of intimacy was evidence enough. We hadn't been close in months. She'd framed it as stress, as work pressure, as the natural evolution of marriage. Now I understood. She wasn't stressed about work. She was distracted by Rafe. One Saturday afternoon, about 5 weeks after I'd accepted the Berlin position, I manufactured an encounter. Isolde had mentioned that Rafe's development was having an open house for potential investors. I suggested we go, just to see the property, just to understand the project she'd been spending so much time on. She hesitated, but couldn't think of a reasonable objection. The property was impressive. Converted industrial space near the water, high ceilings, exposed brick, floor-to-ceiling windows. Exactly the kind of place that would attract the demographic Rafe was targeting. Young professionals with money and a carefully curated sense of taste. Rafe Calderon was everything I'd expected. Mid-30s, expensively casual in the way that requires significant effort and money. Confident, charming, the kind of man who believed his own marketing. When he saw Isolde, his whole face changed. Not dramatically, just enough. A warmth that went beyond professional courtesy. "Isolde," he said, moving toward her with easy familiarity. "Glad you could make it." "Wouldn't miss it," she said. "Rafe, this is my husband, Callum." "Callum." Rafe extended his hand. His grip was firm but not aggressive. "I've heard a lot about you." "Funny," I said. "I've heard almost nothing about you." The words hung in the air for exactly the right amount of time. Not long enough to be overtly hostile, but long enough to create slight discomfort. Rafe recovered quickly. "Well, Isolde likes to keep work and home separate. Smart boundary." "Very smart," I agreed. We spent 20 minutes touring the property. Rafe explained the vision with practiced enthusiasm. Isolde added strategic commentary about brand positioning and target demographics. I nodded and asked the occasional question. What I actually did was watch them, the way they moved in each other's orbit, how Isolde touched his arm when making a point, how Rafe's attention returned to her, even when speaking to others. The shared vocabulary they'd developed over weeks of close collaboration. It was intimate without being obvious. Anyone watching casually would see professional partnership. I saw choreography. When we left, Isolde was quiet. "What did you think?" she finally asked. "He's good at what he does," I said. "The project will probably succeed." "It will." "He seems very invested in your input." Isolde glanced at me. "That's literally my job, Callum. Clients value my input. That's why they hire me." "Of course." We drove home in silence. That night, I finalized my Berlin apartment lease. Remote signing, first and last month's rent, a move-in date aligned with my start date at the firm. I was 7 weeks away from vanishing. The thing about infrastructure work is that you learn to think in systems. You don't just see the road, you see the drainage, the utility corridors, the emergency access points, the maintenance schedules decades into the future. You learn that the most important decisions are the ones made early, quietly, before anyone else realizes the project has started. My departure was infrastructure work, careful planning, invisible preparation. I opened a new bank account. Nothing dramatic, just a place to redirect my direct deposit once the transition happened. I transferred a reasonable amount from our joint savings, not enough to trigger immediate alarm, but enough to function independently. I identified what I'd need to take: clothes, documents, a few personal items. Everything fit in 3 boxes and 2 suitcases. 4 years of marriage condensed into portable luggage. The lease on our house was in both names, but I'd been the one handling most of the administrative details. I reviewed the terms. 6 months remaining. Early termination penalties were substantial, but manageable. I drafted a plan, simple, clean. No room for negotiation or second thoughts. At work, I began transitioning my projects to other team members, framed it as preparation for expanded responsibilities. Nobody questioned it. People like me. Reliable people who do good work and don't cause problems. We're allowed to be boring. Julian was the only one who knew the truth. "You're really doing this," he said one afternoon. We were having coffee in the break room, far from curious ears. "I'm really doing this." "When are you going to tell her?" "I'm not." Julian looked at me for a long moment. He was the kind of person who thought before speaking, considered implications, understood second and third order effects. "That's cold," he finally said. "Yes." "She's going to be blindsided." Yes." "You're okay with that?" It wasn't a question, but I answered anyway. "I'm okay with that." "What about the legal aspects? Divorce?" "I'll handle it from Berlin. Once I'm settled, once she understands that this isn't negotiable." "And if she tries to stop you?" "How?" I asked. "I'm not taking anything that isn't mine. I'm not doing anything illegal. I'm accepting a job offer and relocating. That's not a crime. It's not even unusual." "But you're married." "Geography doesn't change that. It just makes the next conversation much easier to have from a distance." Julian studied me. "You've changed." "No, I've adapted." At home, Isolde was increasingly absent even when physically present. The pattern had stabilized. 4 days a week with Rafe, sometimes lunch, sometimes dinner, sometimes both, with vague explanations about project deadlines and creative breakthroughs. She'd stopped being careful about the details. That's how I knew she'd decided I wasn't a threat. I'd been neutered, domesticated, reduced to a supporting role in her larger narrative. One Tuesday evening, she came home at 9:30. I was reading in the living room. "Sorry I'm late," she said, not apologetic, just stating a fact. "The design review ran long." "No problem. There's leftover chicken in the fridge." "I already ate. We ordered in at the site office." "We?" "The development team." "Right." She kicked off her heels and collapsed onto the couch opposite me. For a moment, she looked tired. Actually tired, not performatively tired. "This project is consuming me," she said, "but it's going to be worth it. Rafe's giving me complete creative control. This could be a portfolio piece that changes everything." "That's great." "You don't sound excited." I looked up from my book. "I'm always excited about your success." She studied me with narrowed eyes. "You've been weird lately." "Weird how?" "I don't know. Distant, like you're thinking about something else all the time." "Maybe I am." "Want to talk about it?" The offer was genuine, or as genuine as Isolde got these days. This was her version of caring, checking a box, maintaining the appearance of emotional availability. "Not really," I said. "Just work stuff. Nothing important." "Okay." She stood. "I'm going to shower and go to bed. Coming up?" "In a bit." She left. I listened to the water run upstairs, listened to her moving around the bedroom, listened to the house settle into quiet. 5 weeks until Berlin. I started telling people about a possible international opportunity, casual mentions, hypothetical scenarios, planting seeds so that when I actually left, it wouldn't seem like a bolt from nowhere. At a work happy hour, I mentioned to a few colleagues that the firm was expanding into Europe, that senior staff might be asked to consider relocation. "Would you go?" someone asked. "Maybe. Depends on the package." "What about Isolde?" "She's pretty flexible these days. Lots of her work can be done remotely." A lie, but a plausible one. Nobody followed up. I told my sister there was a chance I might take an overseas assignment. She was surprised but supportive. Didn't ask too many questions. We weren't especially close. I didn't tell my parents. They were retired in Arizona, and we talked maybe once a month. They'd find out eventually. The layers were building, credible backstory, reasonable explanations, a trail of breadcrumbs that would let people construct a narrative that made sense. Meanwhile, Isolde was constructing her own narrative, one where Callum was stable, predictable, and ultimately irrelevant to the exciting evolution of her life. She talked about Rafe more often now, praised his vision, his energy, his willingness to take risks. She framed it as professional admiration, but the subtext was clear. He represented everything I wasn't. Dynamic, spontaneous, exciting. I was infrastructure. He was architecture. 4 weeks out, I had a particularly revealing conversation with Isolde. We were having dinner at home, something that happened rarely now. She'd been on her phone for most of the meal. "Rafe's hosting a party next weekend," she said, not looking up. "Investor event. Networking. I need to be there." "On Saturday?" "Yes." We had planned Saturday. Dinner with the Morgans. We confirmed 2 weeks ago. She finally looked at me. "Can you go without me? Or reschedule? This is important for the project." Everything is important for the project. What's that supposed to mean? I set down my fork. It means you spend more time with Rafe Calderon than you do with your husband. It means our marriage has become whatever time is left over after his needs are met. I'd expected anger, defense. Instead, she looked almost relieved, as if I'd finally acknowledged something she'd been waiting for me to notice. Callum, she said carefully, you know how important this work is to me. You've always been supportive of my career. Supporting your career isn't the same as accepting your absence. I'm not absent. I'm busy. There's a difference. Is there? She sighed, the sound of someone explaining something to a child. Look, I get that you're feeling neglected. That's valid. But this is a crucial moment for me professionally. Once the project launches, things will settle down. Will they? Of course. And Rafe? What about him? After the project launches, will he still be part of your life? Isolde's expression hardened. He's a professional contact. The answer to that question depends entirely on whether future opportunities make sense, just like any client relationship. Right. Why are you being like this? Like what? Jealous, possessive. You're better than this. I almost laughed. She'd flipped it perfectly, made my reasonable concern into a character flaw, made herself the victim of my insecurity. You're right, I said. I am better than this. She relaxed slightly. I'm glad we can talk about this like adults. Look, after the party, how about we plan a weekend away, just the two of us, reconnect? That sounds nice. Great, she smiled. Went back to her phone. The party was the following Saturday. Isolde spent 3 hours getting ready. She looked stunning. She always did when she wanted to. How do I look? She asked, turning in the bedroom doorway. Like you're trying to impress someone. Her smile faltered. It's a professional event, Callum. I know. She left without saying goodbye. I spent that evening organizing the last details of my departure, updated my address with banks, arranged mail forwarding, confirmed my start date with Berlin, booked my flight, 3 weeks. Isolde came home at 2 a.m. I heard her moving carefully downstairs, trying not to make noise, heard the shower run, heard her slip into bed beside me an hour later. I pretended to be asleep. The next morning she was cheerful, energized, talked about the party, about the connections she'd made, about how excited everyone was about the project. She didn't mention Rafe once. That absence spoke louder than any presence would have. 2 weeks out, I had another encounter with Rafe, unplanned this time. I was grabbing lunch at a place downtown and saw him through the window, sitting at a corner table with his laptop. I went in. Rafe, I said, approaching his table. Mind if I sit? He looked up, surprised. Callum, sure, have a seat. I sat, ordered coffee from the passing waiter, waited. Isolde's not with me, Rafe said with an awkward laugh. If that's what you're wondering. I wasn't wondering. Okay, then what's up? I looked at him directly, took my time, let the silence stretch just long enough to become uncomfortable. I wanted to thank you, I said. Thank me. For showing me who my wife really is. That's valuable information. Most men don't get it so clearly. Rafe's expression shifted. Confusion gave way to wariness. I don't know what you're talking about. Yes, you do. Callum, if you have a problem with Isolde, that's between you two. I'm just a client. No, you're the person she'd rather be with. There's a difference. That's not... He stopped, recalibrated. Look, man, I respect your marriage. Whatever you're imagining, it's just professional collaboration. I smiled, not warmly. Okay. We're colleagues, that's it? Then you have nothing to worry about. Worry about what? I stood. Enjoy your lunch, Rafe. I left him sitting there, confused and unsettled. That evening, my phone rang. Isolde. She was at the site office. Did you talk to Rafe today? Her voice was tight. Ran into him at lunch. Why? What did you say to him? Not much. We chatted. He seemed uncomfortable. Callum. Warning tone. You can't do this. Do what? Harass my clients. Make them uncomfortable. Sabotage my work. I didn't sabotage anything. I just had a conversation. He said you were threatening. I absolutely was not. I thanked him, actually. For what? Clarity. Silence on the other end. Stay away from him, Isolde finally said. I'm serious. Whatever weird thing you're doing, stop it. Noted. She hung up. I sat in the quiet house, smiling. If you never declare war, the other side never fortifies. The final 2 weeks moved quickly. Time has a strange texture when you're counting down to an irreversible decision. Each day felt both impossibly long and startlingly brief. I'd learned something important about Rafe Calderon during my brief research into his business. He was successful, but not stable. His boutique developments were high profile, but thinly capitalized. He relied heavily on a small network of investors who trusted his vision more than his balance sheet. He was vulnerable. I'd also learned that his current project, the waterfront development, was financed partially by a firm where I had a connection. Not a close connection, but enough. A former colleague who'd moved into private equity and specialized in urban development deals. His name was Douglas Brennan. We'd worked together 7 years ago on a failed transit proposal. He was smart, careful, and allergic to risk. I called him. "Callum Vane," he said when he answered. "It's been forever. How are you?" "Good. Busy. I hear you're investing in the Calderon waterfront project." A pause. "Where'd you hear that?" "Around. Is it true?" "We're considering it. Due diligence phase. Why?" "Just curious. I know the developer. Wondered if it was a solid opportunity." "You know Rafe Calderon?" "Peripherally. Through my wife. She's consulting on the branding." "Small world. What's your take on him?" This was the moment. Say nothing, and Rafe's financing probably goes through. Say something, and I could create problems. "Honestly? He's ambitious. Maybe too ambitious. His last 2 projects came in over budget and under-delivered on occupancy projections. The properties themselves are beautiful, but the numbers don't quite work. He's got vision, but vision doesn't cover debt service." "Interesting. We've heard similar concerns from other sources." "I'd trust your instincts. You're better at this than I am. But if you're looking for stability, he might not be your guy." "Appreciate the insight, Callum. How's the infrastructure world treating you?" "Good. Actually, I'm relocating to Berlin in a couple weeks, taking on European operations for the firm." "Congratulations. We should grab a drink before you leave." "Definitely." We didn't schedule anything. Neither of us expected to follow through. It was just something people say. I hung up and waited. 3 days later, Isolde came home furious. "Did you talk to someone about Rafe's financing?" she demanded. "Someone named Brennan?" "Douglas Brennan. He's an old colleague. Why?" "He called Rafe today. Said they're pulling out of the investment. Said they'd heard concerns about project viability." "That's unfortunate." "Did you say something to him?" I looked at her steadily. We had a brief conversation. He asked my opinion. I gave it honestly. I didn't realize I was supposed to lie to protect your client. "You sabotaged him." I shared factual information with someone conducting due diligence. That's not sabotage. That's transparency. "You know exactly what you did." "Do I?" She stared at me, breathing hard. This was the most emotion I'd seen from her in months, finally directed at me instead of her phone. "Why are you doing this?" she asked quietly. "Doing what?" "Punishing me. Punishing him. Whatever this is?" "I'm not punishing anyone. I'm just living my life, making my decisions, establishing my own boundaries." "By destroying Rafe's business?" "His business isn't destroyed. One investor pulled out. He'll find another. If his project is as strong as you keep saying, this is a minor setback. Unless you keep talking to people, keep spreading doubt." I shrugged. "I don't plan to, but I also don't plan to lie if someone asks my professional opinion." She left the room, slammed the bedroom door upstairs. I sat in the kitchen and drank my coffee. The investment pullout wasn't fatal to Rafe's project, but it was damaging. Word spreads in development circles. If one firm backs out over viability concerns, others start asking questions. I'd planted a seed of doubt. That's all. The rest would happen organically. 9 days before my flight, I had my second direct encounter with Rafe. I'd driven to the waterfront development site at 6 in the evening. His car was there, Tesla, expensive, vanity plates. I waited. He emerged 20 minutes later, carrying a laptop bag and looking at his phone. He didn't notice me until I stepped out of my car. "Callum." He stopped. "What are you doing here?" "Wanted to see the place again. It's impressive." "Thanks." He was wary now. "Listen, about the Brennan situation. That's between you and him. Nothing to do with me." "You talked to him." I answered questions. "You cost me a major investment." "Did I? Or did your track record cost you a major investment and I just happened to confirm what they'd already suspected?" Rafe's jaw tightened. He took 2 steps closer. "You need to back off." "Or what?" "Or we're going to have a problem." I didn't move. Just looked at him. Let the moment extend. "We already have a problem, Rafe. You're comfortable with my wife in ways that aren't professional. You've convinced yourself that it's all business because that makes it easier to justify, but you know what it really is. She's my consultant. She's someone else's wife. You seem to forget that part. I haven't forgotten anything. Then act like it. We stood there, two men in a parking lot, speaking in careful euphemisms because neither of us wanted to say the explicit thing. Finally, Rafe said, "Stay away from my business. Stay away from my investors. If you have a problem with Isolde, take it up with her." I don't have a problem with Isolde. I have clarity about Isolde, different things. I got back in my car and drove away, leaving him standing there. That encounter did exactly what I wanted. Rafe was rattled, uncertain. He'd been operating with impunity, assuming I was too passive or oblivious to respond. Now he understood I was neither. More importantly, he'd tell Isolde about it, which meant she'd know I was taking action. She called me an hour later. "What the hell is wrong with you?" "Explain." "Rafe said you confronted him at his site, threatened him." "I didn't threaten anyone. We had a conversation." "He said you were aggressive, intimidating." I was clear. If that intimidated him, that says more about him than me. "Callum, I swear to God." "What? What will you do? Leave me?" "You already have, emotionally. You've been gone for months. You just haven't made it official yet." Silence. "I'm not having this conversation over the phone," she finally said. "When would you like to have it?" "Tonight, when I get home." "Okay." She hung up. I spent the next few hours preparing, not emotionally preparing, logistically preparing. I reviewed my departure checklist, confirmed my flight, made sure everything was in place. Isolde arrived home at 8. She walked in like someone going into battle, shoulders back, chin up, ready for confrontation. "Sit," she said, pointing at the couch. I sat. She remained standing. "I need to understand what's happening here. You've been weird for weeks. Now you're actively trying to ruin Rafe's business. Talk to me." "There's nothing to understand. I'm watching you invest all your energy into someone who isn't your husband. I'm watching you prioritize his needs over ours, and I've decided I'm done enabling it." By sabotaging his business? By being honest about his business. There's a difference. This is jealousy. You're jealous and you're acting out. Maybe. Or maybe I'm just tired of being convenient. She stared at me. "What does that mean?" "It means you've turned me into infrastructure, Isolde. Reliable, stable, boring. You keep me around because I make your life easier, not because you actually want me in it. That's not fair, isn't it? When's the last time you looked at me the way you look at Rafe? He's my client. Stop lying. To me. To yourself. He's not just a client, and you know it." Her face went pale. "Are you accusing me of something?" "I'm observing something. You're with him 4 days a week. You laugh with him. You're energized by him. You come home late and shower immediately. You've emotionally checked out of this marriage and convinced yourself it's because of work. I haven't—" She stopped, sat down across from me. "Callum, I care about you. I always have. But we've grown apart. That happens. It doesn't mean I've been unfaithful. Haven't you? No? Then explain the last 6 months." She couldn't. Or wouldn't. Instead, she said, "What do you want from me?" "Nothing." "That's not an answer." "It's the only answer. I don't want anything from you anymore. I've stopped expecting things I'm not going to get." "So what now?" "Now I live my life. You live yours. We see what happens." That sounds like separation. Does it? She looked at me with something like fear, real emotion. Finally. "I don't want that," she said quietly. "I don't want to lose you." "You already did. You just haven't noticed yet." I stood and walked upstairs, leaving her sitting alone in the living room. The next morning, Isolde tried to act normal, made coffee, asked about my day, talked about mundane household things. I responded politely, went to work, came home. We moved around each other like actors in a play, both pretending the previous night's conversation hadn't happened. 5 days before my flight, I took my next action. Rafe's Tesla was parked outside his development site again. It was evening, nearly dark. I'd brought a tool, simple, portable, a valve stem remover, tiny piece of equipment that lets air out of tires. Legal, not technically vandalism, just inconvenient. I walked past his car, paused, crouched down as if tying my shoe, removed 2 valve stems, dropped them in my pocket, kept walking. Within 5 minutes, both tires were flat. I drove home. Later that evening, Isolde got a call. I could hear her voice from the bedroom, trying to be quiet, but failing. "What? Are you serious?" "No, I'm sure it was just random." "Yes, I understand. Okay, I'll see you tomorrow." She came downstairs. "Someone let the air out of Rafe's tires. Both passenger side tires. He thinks it was you." "Why would I do that?" Because you're trying to intimidate him. Did he see me there? No. Then how does he know it was me? Because this is exactly the kind of petty thing you'd do right now. I looked at her calmly. I've been home all evening. You can check the cameras. Check my phone's location history. I haven't been anywhere near his site. She studied me. You're lying. Prove it. She couldn't. No cameras had caught me. No witnesses had seen me. My phone's GPS would show I'd been at the grocery store and then home. Stay away from him, she said. I am. But we both knew I wasn't. 3 days before my flight to Berlin, everything accelerated. Rafe's business troubles were spreading. 2 more potential investors had backed out, citing concerns similar to Brennan's. His contractor was asking questions about payment schedules. The local business press had picked up the story, framing it as, "Boutique developer faces headwinds." None of this was directly my fault. I'd only talked to Brennan. But in development circles, one visible crack creates scrutiny. Other people started asking their own questions, running their own numbers, reaching their own conclusions. Rafe was circling the drain, and I'd only given him the first push. Isolde was frantic. She tied her professional reputation to his success. If his project failed visibly, it would reflect poorly on her judgment and effectiveness. She spent entire days at his office, came home exhausted, stopped pretending to care about our marriage. I need to save this, she said one evening. We were in the kitchen. She was drinking wine, her 3rd glass. Save what? The project, my reputation, everything I've built with Rafe. Built with Rafe, I repeated. Interesting phrasing. You know what I mean. I know exactly what you mean. She set down her glass hard enough to slosh wine onto the counter. Why are you like this? Why can't you just support me? I supported you for 4 years. I rejected opportunities. I adjusted my life to accommodate yours, and you repaid that by emotionally abandoning me for someone more interesting. I didn't abandon you. Yes, you did. Then why are you still here? If I'm so terrible, why haven't you left? I smiled. Who says I haven't? She stared at me. What? Nothing. Forget it. But the seed was planted. Confusion flickered across her face. She almost asked the follow-up question, then decided against it. That night, I finalized the last details. My apartment in Berlin was ready. My start date was confirmed. My flight was booked for 6 a.m. in 2 days. I'd told no one except Julian. Isolde didn't know. My family didn't know. As far as everyone was concerned, I was still living my normal, predictable life. The next morning, I packed. Not everything, just essentials, clothes, documents, laptop. A few personal items, 2 suitcases, 1 carry-on. I loaded them into my car and drove to Julian's place. Asked if I could store them in his garage for a day. Tomorrow's the day? He asked. Tomorrow's the day. And she has no idea. None. He shook his head. This is either brilliant or insane. Probably both. That evening, Isolde was at Rafe's office again. Crisis management. She'd texted me not to wait up. I sat in the empty house and thought about the 4 years I'd spent here. Remembered moving in, remembered thinking this would be permanent. Remembered believing in a future that no longer existed. You can't mourn something while you're still inside it. The grief would come later. For now, I felt only resolution. My phone rang. Unknown number. Hello? Is this Callum Vane? Male voice, unfamiliar. Yes, who's this? My name's Marcus. I'm a friend of Rafe's. We need to talk. About? About you backing off. Leaving him alone, stopping whatever you're doing. I almost laughed. Rafe sent you to threaten me? Nobody's threatening anyone. I'm just trying to help resolve a situation before it gets worse. There's no situation. I haven't done anything to Rafe. That's not how he sees it. Then he's paranoid. Maybe. Or maybe you've been messing with his business and he's finally pushing back. Tell Rafe if he has a problem with me, he can address it himself. I don't respond to intermediaries. I hung up. The call was revealing. Rafe was desperate enough to involve someone else. That meant he felt out of control. Good. 20 minutes later, my phone rang again. Rafe this time. We need to meet, he said. No preamble. Why? To end this. Whatever you think is happening, you're wrong, and you need to stop. I'm not doing anything. Then explain the investor calls, explain your colleague backing out, explain the flat tires, explain all of it. I explained the investor situation. Now, that was honest professional feedback. As for the rest, you're connecting dots that don't exist. I'm not responsible for your business problems. You're lying. Prove it. Silence. I care about Isolde, he finally said. She's important to me, but not the way you think. We've never... Stop. I don't care. You should care, because you're destroying your marriage over a misunderstanding. My marriage was destroyed months ago. I'm just acknowledging it. Callum, one more thing, Rafe. I'm not your enemy because I'm jealous. I'm your enemy because you made the mistake of underestimating me. You thought I was safe, passive, too comfortable to respond. You were wrong. I hung up. That conversation changed something. Rafe now understood this wasn't going to resolve quietly. He'd have to make a choice, escalate or retreat. He chose escalation. The next morning, 18 hours before my flight, Isolde came home at 7 a.m. She'd been out all night. Her hair was disheveled. She looked exhausted. "We need to talk," she said. "Okay." She sat down at the kitchen table. I poured coffee and sat across from her. "Rafe told me everything," she said, "about the investors, about the confrontations, about the vandalism, all of it. And I'm asking you to stop. Please. You're ruining everything." "I'm not ruining anything. His business is failing because it was always precarious. I just helped people see that." "Why? Why do you care so much about destroying him?" "Because he took something from me. He took you. Not physically, maybe, but emotionally. And you let him?" "I didn't let anything happen. There is nothing between us." "Then why does he call you at midnight? Why do you spend more time with him than me? Why do you light up when you talk about him?" She didn't answer. "That's what I thought," I said. "Callum, I know I've been distant. I know I've prioritized work over us. And I'm sorry. But this isn't the way to fix it. You're burning everything down." "I'm not trying to fix it. I'm trying to end it." She went pale. "What?" "I'm done, Isolde. This marriage is over. It's been over for months. We just haven't made it official. No, we can fix this. We can go to counseling. We can... I don't want to fix it. I want to move on." "To what?" I stood. "My own life? One that doesn't involve waiting for you to remember I exist." "Where are you going?" "Out." I left her sitting there, drove to Julian's, picked up my luggage, drove to a hotel near the airport, checked in, set my alarm for 4 a.m. My phone buzzed with messages from Isolde, 20 texts in 2 hours, ranging from apologetic to angry to desperate. I didn't respond. At midnight, Rafe called me again. "She's devastated," he said. "What the hell did you say to her?" "The truth, something you've both been avoiding." "This isn't my fault." "Isn't it? You pursued a married woman. You convinced yourself it was professional. You let it become personal because it made you feel powerful." "That's not..." "And now she's confused because she thought she could have both of us. Thought she could keep me stable and comfortable while exploring something exciting with you. But that's not how reality works." "You're a coward," Rafe said, "running away instead of fighting for your marriage." "I'm not running away. I'm relocating. There's a difference." "Relocating where?" "That's not your concern." I hung up. The hotel room was quiet, sterile. I sat on the bed and felt nothing. No anger, no sadness. Just the calm that comes from knowing you've made an irreversible decision. At 4 a.m., I woke up, showered, dressed, checked out. My flight left at 6. I boarded, found my seat, watched the ground crew load bags. My phone buzzed one last time. Isolde. "Where are you?" I turned off my phone. Berlin was gray when I landed. Appropriate. I took a cab to my apartment. Small but functional, furnished by the relocation company. It would do. I unpacked slowly, put clothes in the closet, set up my laptop, made coffee in the unfamiliar kitchen. My phone stayed off for 3 days. When I finally turned it on, I had 64 messages, mostly from Isolde, a few from Rafe, one from my sister asking if everything was okay. I responded only to my sister. "Everything's fine. Took the Berlin job. I'll call you soon." To everyone else, silence. The messages from Isolde followed a pattern. Confusion, anger, bargaining, more anger. Finally, resigned sadness. The last message she'd sent was yesterday. "I know you're gone. I don't know where. I don't know why you didn't tell me. But I'm going to find you. We need to talk about this properly." I deleted the message. Work started well. The Berlin office was professional and organized. They'd been briefed on my background. My transition was smooth. I spent my first week learning systems, meeting people, understanding the projects I'd be overseeing. Infrastructure in Europe operated differently than in the US. Different regulations, different priorities, different timelines. I enjoyed the complexity, enjoyed being somewhere that no one knew my history, enjoyed being just Callum Vane, strategist, rather than Callum Vane, abandoned husband. 2 weeks in, I hired a lawyer in the U.S. Divorce attorney. I provided documentation, marriage certificate, joint assets, property holdings. I authorized him to file on grounds of irreconcilable differences. No fault, clean, simple. The lawyer warned me that Isolde would be served papers within 10 days, that she'd likely contest, that this would get complicated. I told him I didn't care about complicated. I cared about final. 3 weeks in, Isolde figured out I was in Berlin. I don't know how. Maybe Julian told someone. Maybe she hired a private investigator. Maybe she just guessed based on my work history. But she figured it out. And she booked a flight. I found out from a message she sent, "I'm coming to Berlin. I know you're there. I know you're avoiding me. But this ends now. We're going to talk face to face. I'm arriving Friday." Friday was 3 days away. I considered my options. I could meet her at the airport, have the confrontation in public, control the narrative. Or I could let her come to my apartment, let her discover what I'd already done. I chose the second option. On Thursday evening, I made arrangements. My apartment lease was in my name only. But I'd been planning ahead. I'd been planning for weeks. I contacted the building manager, told him I'd decided the apartment was too large for my needs, that I'd found something smaller, that I'd be moving out at the end of the month, asked if he had anyone interested in taking over the lease. He did. A graduate student from Munich, young woman studying architecture, needed a place immediately. I met with her Thursday night, explained the situation, explained that the apartment was available now, if she wanted it, that I'd cover the lease transfer fees. She was confused but grateful, signed the paperwork. By Friday morning, Mirella Weiss was the official resident of my apartment. I moved my belongings to the smaller place I'd actually found. Studio apartment, industrial building, 15 minutes away. At 2 p.m., Isolde's flight landed. At 4 p.m., she arrived at the address of my now former apartment. I wasn't there, but Mirella was. I know what happened because Mirella called me afterward, concerned and confused. Isolde had knocked on the door. Mirella had answered. "Can I help you?" Mirella had asked in accented English. "I'm looking for Callum Vane," Isolde had said. "My husband. He lives here." "I'm sorry. No, I live here. Just moved in yesterday." "That's impossible. This is his address." "Perhaps you have the wrong building." "No, this is it. I checked. He's renting this apartment." He was renting this apartment. The building manager told me he moved out. I took over his lease. That's when it had hit her, Mirella said. The woman at the door had gone completely pale, had staggered slightly, had put her hand against the door frame for balance. "He moved?" Isolde had asked quietly. "Yes, yesterday, I think. Or the day before. I'm not sure exactly." "Did he leave a forwarding address?" "The building manager would have that information. I'm sorry I can't help more." Isolde had stood there for a long moment, not speaking, just staring at Mirella as if she might be an illusion that would dissolve if examined closely enough. Finally, she'd said, "Thank you," and walked away. Mirella had watched her go, watched her sit on the curb outside the building, watched her cry. She seemed very upset, Mirella told me on the phone. I felt bad for her. Should I have said something else? "No, you handled it perfectly. Thank you for calling me." "Is she really your wife?" "Technically, for now." "Will she be back?" "I don't think so." Mirella had been quiet for a moment. "Whatever is happening between you two, I hope it resolves." It already has. I hung up. That evening, Isolde called me. I'd unblocked her number, knowing this call would come. "Where are you?" She didn't sound angry. She sounded broken. "Berlin." "I was just at your apartment," a stranger answered. "That's because it's not my apartment anymore." "You moved?" "Yes." "Why didn't you tell me you were leaving?" "Because you would have tried to stop me, or convinced me to stay, or turned it into a negotiation, and I didn't want any of that." "So you just vanished?" "Yes." "That's cruel, Callum." "Is it? More cruel than watching you fall in love with someone else while pretending our marriage was fine? More cruel than being treated like infrastructure while you built something real with Rafe?" "I didn't fall in love with him." "Maybe not. But you were heading there? And you would have blamed me for being boring when you finally arrived." She was crying now. I could hear it in her voice. "I know I screwed up. I know I took you for granted. But this, disappearing, starting over without even trying to fix things? We couldn't fix things, Isolde. We could only prolong them, and I was tired of prolonging. I'm here now, in Berlin. We can talk. Really talk. No. Please. I'm filing for divorce. My lawyer will contact you next week. It's no fault. Equitable division? Simple. I'm not trying to punish you financially. I just want this to be over. I don't want a divorce. That's unfortunate, because I do. Silence. Long enough that I thought she'd hung up. Did you ever love me? She finally asked. Yes, very much. And now? Now I'm relieved. Another silence. I came here to fix us, she said quietly, to show you I was serious about making this work. You came here because you finally realized I was gone. That's not the same as wanting to fix things. That's wanting to fix your own guilt. That's not fair. Maybe not, but it's true. Where are you staying? That's not your concern anymore. Callum, goodbye, Isolde. I hung up. She tried calling back 3 times. I didn't answer. She sent more messages. Desperate, pleading, promising change. I didn't respond. Over the next few days, the messages slowed, then stopped. A week later, my lawyer confirmed she'd been served papers. She'd hired her own lawyer. They were beginning negotiations. It would take months to finalize. There would be back and forth about assets, about terms, about timeline, but the ending was inevitable now. We both knew it. I settled into my new life in Berlin, started dating, nothing serious, just reminders that I could be wanted by someone who actually saw me. Work was good, challenging, consuming in a productive way. I heard from Julian that Rafe's waterfront project had collapsed entirely. Too many investors had pulled out. The property sat unfinished, a monument to ambition outpacing capability. I felt nothing about that, not satisfaction, not guilt, just the neutral acknowledgement of predictable consequences. Isolde stayed in the U.S., kept working, kept living, probably found someone new eventually, or went back to Rafe, or decided to be alone. I didn't follow up, didn't check, didn't care. 6 months after leaving, the divorce was finalized. I received the paperwork at my office, signed where indicated, sent it back. That evening, I went to a bar near my apartment, sat alone, drank good whiskey. Thought about the 4 years I'd spent married to someone who'd valued me only until someone more interesting appeared. Thought about how close I'd come to accepting that as normal. Thought about the moment Isolde had realized I was already gone, standing on a curb in Berlin, confronted by a stranger in my former apartment. Understanding, finally, that I'd moved on without her permission. That moment was worth everything. I finished my drink, paid the tab, walked home through streets that were starting to feel familiar. I'd built something new, not out of revenge, not out of anger, out of refusal. Refusal to be infrastructure in someone else's narrative. Refusal to wait for affection that would never arrive. Refusal to accept emotional abandonment as the price of stability. I'd reclaimed my life by walking away from people who'd forgotten its value. And now, in this gray city, with its efficient systems and cold beauty, I was finally exactly where I needed to be, alone, but not lonely, free,